when the word compliance appears in a strategy discussion, you could almost predict the reactions. It's like, oh no, more reviews, more documentation. That is a behavior that's, I would say, predictable.
Yes, predictable, quite understandable as well. I think organisations are overwhelmed with regulation, particularly in the AI space. There's lots of talk about it, and it is quite complex.
Welcome back to AI and the Executive Table, the podcast where AI meets real-world decisions. In the last episode, we talked about AI governance and the frameworks that need to be in place.
And today we're going to be taking that to the next level and talking very practically about compliance in the AI space.
Naureen, you spent a big part of your career in highly regulated industries and also on that intersection between business and governance. Why do you think that companies struggle adopting compliance with exponential technologies like AI?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting place to start. I think it is first and foremost because most compliance programs are led and driven from legal. They're very legal based and therefore necessarily manual, relying on individual, legal teams and lawyers reviewing things, asking questions, lots of back and forth. And then, you might get a 4 or 5 page considered opinion from the lawyer, 4 or 5 pages when you are shipping product and wanting to get it out the door, super fast. There's a conflict there between that traditional model and the pace and scale of AI development. I think also because the regulatory and legal landscape is so complex. It's so, it's evolving. Yes, we have the EU AI Act, which is the first global regulation that's come out. It's not going to be the only one. And even though we have the regulation, there's so many unanswered questions about how that regulation is actually going to be applied and enforced that lawyers, compliance professionals are still, wrestling with. I think the other big difference with compliance, designing compliance frameworks for AI technology and AI transformation compared perhaps to other transformations is you have to be quite technically proficient. You have to understand some concepts about how this technology actually works to be able to have the right conversation with the teams that are building it or developing it for deployment. And often you don't. You get extreme technical experts, like yourself in the technology, aren't as well versed in the legal side, or you have amazing lawyers but they can only talk in principles because they don't understand the technology. So I think that's quite a significant challenge with compliance and AI in particular.
Yeah, that brings me actually to the year 2018. It sounds so it's not back then, but that was, I think, the time where the first draft of the EU AI Act came out. Mm-hmm. And I remember it because I was in a discussion in an expert group that we built at the time where I was representing the tech side. Right. I was working at the IT department, and I was discussing with the lawyers, with the legal department. They needed our feedback on the draft. So I had those conversations, and they were actually really interesting because this is where the understanding between the technical department and the legal department in relation to the AI Act started. Because we had all these paragraphs, so we went really through everything, and they were asking me, so how easy is it to execute, and how do you operationalize it? Oh, hard word. So that's yes. I can totally relate. Yes. That experience was really helpful, even for the collaboration many years after.
Yes, and indeed, that conversation happened because you were specifically involved in the drafting
Yeah,
of the legislation, or played an important role there.
The feedback,
In an organisation, in the normal organisational context, those conversations are very rare. But as you say, of huge value if you can bridge the gap between the legal teams and the technical teams, and somehow facilitate them speaking the same language, or being able to meet each other halfway. I think that is a key enabler to then designing something that actually works for both parties.
Yeah. Well, I must say, in that case, we had an amazing chief compliance officer, Manuela Macat, and she took care of that conversations happening, actually. So we had different rounds where colleagues of mine, so experts from the IT, sat together with the compliance team, with the legal team, and discussed those topics. And we also had company set guidelines while working with AI. So the compliance team started developing that draft. So that was even before the regulation.
Yeah.
So the company
Yeah.
gave itself guidelines. And then they started the discussion with us to check how realistic it is.
That,
and
like
how,
you say, that's so progressive.
Yes. actually, and I enjoyed those discussions back in the time, and at the same time, I was thinking, why are we talking so much about ethics and guidelines? We want to do some coding, right? But now reflecting on that many years after, it's like, actually, that was really progressive.
Yes.
and
It makes me also, as you talk there, think about other situations in which that's quite normalized in organizations. So when you're working on a big deal, a big contract, it is very common for the lawyers and the engineering folk or the product folk that are going to be building and deploying whatever it is you're selling to be working together and talking together, right? This is what we're negotiating in the contract. If we negotiate this, or they're looking for this, what would that mean for our delivery and our ability to achieve? And so there are other situations in which you do have experts in the kind of on the legal contract side coming together and kind of speaking, effectively operating as a single team. With the product people and the technology people and all sorts of other roles within organizations. It makes me think about that happens in that context.
Yeah, and that's more natural in that context, actually.
But it doesn't necessarily carry through. But your example is a great exception, and a standard that is something that other organizations can take.
Yeah, I agree, and it's funny. I just reflected about it now. The other experience that I had is before the AI Act, there was a lot of uncertainty in the industry about how to do this AI thing, right? So I was working at the telecommunication industry at the time, and we had our own guidelines when it comes to AI. So we set the framework to ourselves, let's say. And after the AI Act came out, my peers in other organizations, they were like, okay, now we know what the regulator is expecting from us. Yes. Now we can move faster.
Yes.
And when I was hearing from other stakeholders in the industry complaining about the AI Act, this is going to stop, especially politicians, I would say even, this is going to stop innovation. And I'm like, no, I'm actually experiencing the exact opposite.
Yes.
Before the draft came out, we were all expecting, okay, what is the EU working on? But after we got the first draft, it's like, okay, now we know the boundaries, and we can go.
Yes, and back to a topic or a concept we talked in the previous episode about clarity. Clarity creates pace, effectively, at the end of the day. If you don't have that clarity, then you're risking going slower or going fast, but going fast in the wrong direction. Applying that to the response to the EU AI Act, yes, I agree. And in fact, it's one of the main reasons for the European Commission taking this approach to regulating AI, because they want to create clarity for organisations so that innovation can thrive within Europe, whilst obviously safeguarding against the risks that to people and groups and societies that these technologies can bring. But I would also caution, I mean, let's not bring GDPR into the conversation, although I do love GDPR, but I made a living off of it. But
that should be a full episode. That's the only thing. Yeah.
But I do think that there just is some caution, which is healthy skepticism. That yes, it does set some really clear rules, and we can get into the key things that C-suite members need to kind of know and just have in their minds with the legislation. But I do think that it's when it comes to enforcement action, that's when we're going to really see and hopefully experience a bit more of a harmonised approach across the different member states. Because at the moment with GDPR, although there is the aspiration that there is harmonisation, actually the experiences of businesses is different across the different member states.
Oh yeah, it is. It's a chaos. Every member state have their own interpretation.
Exactly.
And I think in Germany we are proudly having the worst.
You said it, I didn't.
Yeah, it's okay, it's our fault. So that's the expectation now. Please don't repeat that mistake with the AI Act. Let's try to keep it harmonized in Europe, because it makes the life of businesses easier.
And I think
in the EU.
Whether it is because of that feedback and experience on GDPR, whether it's because of geopolitics being what it is at the moment, a lot of the C-suite, and actually one of the key things that C-suite should kind of be aware of is something called the Digital Omnibus, which is a set of proposed adjustments to all of the main digital regulations across Europe, including GDPR and including the EU AI Act. So there's a significant consultation that's going on at the moment, but what the European Commission is seeking to do is to make adjustments that, while still protect and safeguard fundamental rights and the position of society and individuals, but also balanced against, innovation, simplification, particularly for smaller organisations who don't have the resources to be able to navigate these complex regulations. So I think that message is being heard, but yeah, proof is in the pudding, as we say in the UK.
Yes, I mean the execution part is going to be a challenge, I guess. And one perspective I wanted to bring here, I remember while working at the IT department, I looked at compliance as the showstopper, basically. Right? You want to innovate, you want to be quick, and then they said, "Oh, have you thought about this? Did you need that approval?" And years later, I was a CTO and board member, and having that liability on your shoulders, my perspective on compliance completely changed. So something that was really, I was really struggling with being in an IT department, I learned to love being in a boardroom. And I hope that this changes, I think this small story changes the perspective on compliance, because I do believe if done right, it can't be an enabler. And obviously the question is how to do it right and what is the relevant elements of it, again, for a C-suite.
Yeah, and like your story, honest story on that is a great one, because what it shows or makes me think about is effectively you were accountable when you were in that board role. So it was that felt accountability that made you love. I'm sure probably love is too harsh a word. So I think the challenge for organisations and the challenge for compliance leaders be it on the C-suite or otherwise, is how do you create that culture? How do you emulate that culture of felt accountability? Because when people feel accountable, they care. And that's fundamentally, as a compliance, particularly operating at the strategic level, you're trying to create a situation where people care about things. Because when you care, you might see it as more of an enabler than a pain point. But I don't think we'll ever fully get there. I think also one of the things I wanted to just explore is, with your experience on executive teams and on the board, what is the conversation that's happening when it comes to the EU AI Act? What do senior leaders think about it? Are they even talking about it? Or beyond the Act, other regulations that apply?
Well, there is definitely a lot of talking about it. And I would say I see like two groups. So the group of leaders who are actually executing and delivering AI transformation, they have a different narratives than the ones who are far away from the execution, and they just see the regulation part really stopping the development. And this is what I said, in a CIO, CTO peer group, you'll see that people are actually working on AI since many years, before the AI Act and after the AI Act, and we have regulations from different sides. So especially if you stick to GDPR, you're going to be fine. Of course, the first thing you need to do is to classify the risks. I think that's the first phase. Which use cases you have. Are they high risk, low risk, or mid-level risk, let's say? That's the first step. And as long as you are in the low risk, you're actually fine. There aren't so many boundaries or limitations.
I would echo that. One of the key concepts within the EU AI Act that actually would be really helpful for C-suite members to understand is the risk-based approach. So you talked about understanding your risk categories and classifying your use cases. So why do we say that? Let's start with the risk pyramid, which is the central premise of the regulation. So you've got the highest possible risk of that these technologies can bring, and those are predefined types of use case, which are listed in the regulation, which are prohibited, and they are that came in last year. Very few organisations are going to be considering applying, because it's things like manipulating and individuals exploiting people's vulnerabilities,
mass surveillance,
mass surveillance. So they're the highest of high risk. Beyond that, you then have a category which is high risk. So you have prohibited, then you have high. And again, high risk use cases are described, they're prescribed in they're set out in the regulation. The ones that are going to be most relevant to most organisations, one is going to be in the HR space. Because any of the regulated AI technologies or AI systems that are supporting in decisions on hiring, so CV screening, massive area, area where a lot of organisations, I think, probably are using some of these tools.
And there are so many tools. There
are so many.
I do believe
tools.
most organisations are actually using them now. Yeah.
And actually, it's a big focus area. That particular use case is a big focus area in the UK as well. So that's an example of where organisations might be impacted by high risk, and we can come on and talk about what does that practically mean and what do they need to be doing about that. But I think the key point I want to land here is that beyond prohibited, very small set of very high risk use cases, and then another quite small set of high risk use cases, all other use cases are either going to be limited risk, so it is a third of four categories, or no risk. And if there's no risk, EU AI Act doesn't require anything of you. You still have to comply with GDPR
with other regulations already in place, apply. Basically.
But there's no additional compliance burden. Where you're limited risk, what is that saying? That's that's tackling any technologies that you're going to directly interact with as an individual. So chatbots, deep fakes, those you just have to watermark them. You have to be transparent. You have to let individuals know this is AI generated, so that that person can be alert and make informed choices about receiving that content. So the risk pyramid is a key concept just to bear in mind. And I think if you're in a C-suite member that's perhaps not in one of these expert groups, and you're having conversations or you're part of a discussion, that might be a helpful framework to bring the conversation back to. But hang on, which risk category are we talking about here? I think the second area, as you say, key activity that should be going on within an organisation, and to be honest, in most larger organisations should already be in flight, is this classification. So you need an inventory. You can't govern what you can't see. And let's talk as well beyond, we want to govern it to make sure we're ticking the EU the regulation compliance box. Yeah, but you also want to know, where are we spending money on these AI tools, and what return on that investment, and who's tracking that, and whose budget is it going out of?
That's actually, we need another episode for that piece. Maybe let me go back with one question. You explained the classification framework with the pyramid, which is really helpful, by the way, because that is, let's say, the one thing we should keep in mind. What are, in your point of view, the biggest misunderstandings of the EU AI Act?
I think that the first one being that AI is AI. But actually the EU AI Act has a very specific definition of what is an AI system. So an individual model is not regulated. It needs to be part of a system which generates an output, a decision and recommendation. Okay. And then we've just had published by the European Commission some very lengthy guidelines on what is an AI system. It brings us back to the conversation we were having earlier about, you need both super technical people and legal people looking at those guidelines and then applying those guidelines to the technologies, because there are lots of technologies that have been well established that fall under the umbrella of AI that do not fit within the scope of regulated AI. So an AI system that actually the rules bite on. But a compliance professional or a lawyer cannot make that decision by themselves. So they need to have that joined up conversation with the technical experts in the organisation to actually classify their system, not just where does it sit on the pyramid, but is it even in scope of the regulation?
Yeah, that's a very hard question, and I remember we had that once, and we needed to get even some external expertise.
I'm not surprised.
And we hired another lawyer to give us their opinion, because it's really hard. I mean, there's also one point you said. You need to have that overview on your AI systems, and a very practical thing. You need to flag all systems you have in the organization, and do they have AI or not? And I guess very soon it's gonna be everywhere. But as long as it's not everywhere, you need that inventory.
You need the inventory,
and that is one of the first things I introduced in my last.
And it's also one of those activities that easy to say, difficult actually in practice to do. Not just to do once, but it has to be a living, updated, living, breathing thing. And also it brings me to another area that is a watch out for C-suite to just have in mind, C-suite members. Don't just focus on the obvious AI. The real risk lies in just with IT. The real risk lies with the shadow IT. Where in your organisation is AI silently being added as a feature to a well-established enterprise solution tool that you have. Are you having those conversations with your vendors as part of general vendor management, QBRs, to say, well, do you have an AI roadmap? What is on your AI? What have you introduced that we should know about?
New features. Yeah.
And then, of course, and the stats on this, the research that's been done, quite scary. The number of people who are secretly, because they don't feel they could speak up about it, just generally, using publicly available AI tools because they've started using them in their personal life. They feel they're impressive and they're blindly going off in that direction. We'll be talking about risks in the next episode, but that is a practice that is there, and I think that the inventory, what does it achieve? Transparency, visibility, and that you can only start then governing things, practices, tools that you bring to light. So
yeah. Maybe one tip, because you said it's hard to execute and to keep updated. So what I did in my last organization is to flag it on Lean IX. It's an SAP included tool, let's say, and then you have your whole systems anyway, or solutions, and then you can just say, okay, we added a filter, and then you say, okay, here's AI, and here isn't, and that system is being updated regularly anyway, or anyhow. So,
and if I was the DPO in your organisation, I would love you. Because often DPOs are hunting down where's the single source of truth of the processing systems.
I know. It took us time to make that the single source of truth. I totally agree. It wasn't before.
Yeah.
So step by step. I mean, that's the point, step by step. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if we can summarize it a little bit, that would be compliance is here to protect you.
Mm-hmm. I would say 3 key things from a C-suite perspective. Firstly, connect your legal folk with your technical folk. Get them working together, trying to speak the same language. And one tip here is look for the individuals, and there will be individuals in organizations who are the unicorns in that they are able to speak tech and they're able to speak compliance. Use those people to be your connectors and be the bridge, because I think having that joined up conversation is critical. So that's the first key point. I think the second key point is you can't govern what you can't see. So visibility, inventory. It can be done. We've heard from you, it can be done. It is a critical activity because everything else will kind of hang off of your inventory. So track down where is AI in your organization, the more visible, obvious AI, but also the hidden and shadow AI tools that might be out of view. So that's number 2. And then I think finally is that risk pyramid. Because the legislation that regulates, be it EU AI Act or even GDPR, they're all risk-based pieces of legislation. And so I think having that risk pyramid as a kind of mental model is a key one to navigate this space.
Okay. So is it a good advice if we say, if you're a CEO listening to this conversation, next week you should ask your team about that inventory?
Yes.
That's going to be a very harsh question.
Yes.
I think.
Do we have one?
The CIOs will hate me.
Well, they can reply with, we might need some funding to go and do that. But yes, that's definitely a really good practical question. Another one I might add is maybe towards the CHRO. Have we done a skills profiling? Do we have these unicorns who can speak tech and speak legal? And who are these people? let's find them, because they're important.
Again, so we're talking about clarity not only in systems applications, but also in our workforce.
Exactly.
So you see, a lot of clarity here. Thank you so much for your perspectives.
Thank you.
In the next episode, we're going to talk about risk management. Thanks for joining.